Betsy Thompson, and I'd like to invite you to join us in our series on overcoming codependent behaviors. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. We're on lesson 7. Last time we talked about detachment, and at first the subject of detachment to a codependent sounds like a very negative thing. It sounds like something would be impossible to do. There's no way that you could practice detachment and continue on with your life. But when you understand what detachment is really about, it's a very upbeat subject. It's one of my favorite. It gives you so much freedom and your loved ones so much freedom, and it pushes you forward on the road to recovery. I hope you enjoyed that one last time. Let's talk about boundaries. Most codependents go through life with walls instead of boundaries, or the exact opposite, no walls or boundaries at all, but rarely do they have a healthy awareness of boundaries. And I'll have to admit, when I first saw the subject of boundaries, I thought, what is there to know about boundaries? Well, I found out what there was to know. Imagine, if you can, a square drawn with just 4 black lines that connect, a square. And imagine another square drawn with dots far apart, and another square drawn with dashes equally spaced. And those are 3 different kinds of boundaries, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. First of all, what are boundaries? Boundaries are invisible borders that have 3 purposes: to keep people from coming into our space and abusing us, also to keep us from going into the space of others and abusing them. The first thought a codependent has is, I would never do that. I respect people's boundaries. I would never go into their space and abuse them, so that does not apply to me. The third thing that boundaries do, they give each of us a way to keep our sense of who we are. And hopefully by now we're beginning to get some idea of who we are. We're beginning to see our identity and let it develop and grow. And good boundaries can help us keep that.
Okay, Betsy, what would happen if a person didn't have boundaries?
Well, we're going to talk about that at the bottom of this page, the results of no boundaries. So first of all, let's talk about 2 other kinds of boundaries, external and internal, and what they're for and what they mean. External boundaries allow us to choose distance from other people and give or refuse permission to touch us. We're all obvious of that. We know that, and we are very much in touch with that. Internal boundaries protect our thinking, feelings. There's that word again, feelings. Remember in lesson 2, I said that word is going to keep coming up and coming up, and unless we get on top of that one, learn how to feel our feelings, we cannot do the others. So internal boundaries protect our thinking and feeling and behavior and keep them functional. Good, healthy internal boundaries allow us to take responsibility for our thinking, our feelings, and behavior. It keeps them separate from that of others, and we stop blaming others for what we think and feel and do. And so when we get to the stage of our recovery, that we have good, healthy boundaries that keeps us from getting hooked into those other situations where we start reacting and they react, and then we're back to square one again. It also allows us to stop taking responsibility for the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of others, so we can stop manipulating and controlling those around us. Boundaries is going to help us stop all that controlling. Now, Sharon asked, what are the results of no boundaries? It's a little bit like having no feelings, like being out of touch with your feelings. Without boundaries, one cannot be aware of or sensitive to the boundaries of others. Have you ever known abusive, obnoxious, loud, in-your-face people that just come on and they take over situations and they disrupt whatever's going on, and you think, why on earth do they act like that?
Okay,
What
so
is wrong
you
with
saying
them?
they doing this because they don't respect
Many
others?
people like that have no boundaries.
Okay.
They don't know that you can respect or disrespect boundaries because they have no boundaries. And they think what they're doing is appropriate.
Okay, where does a person learn about boundaries from what?
How do we get boundaries? First of all, you're not born with boundaries. I probably would have thought you were at one point. But a baby does not have boundaries. Boundaries must be taught. As a very small child, you had no boundaries, no internal way to protect yourself from abuse, and no way to keep from abusing others. You know, babies bite and pinch and pull hair and scream in church and throw food in restaurants. They don't have boundaries. We learn boundaries from our parents or guardians. We will grow up with the boundaries of those who raised us. People from dysfunctional homes where denial was in effect usually suffer from boundary impairment, where they either were not protected enough or protected too much denial in that home. And they got out in the world and had no boundaries and no protection. Codependents demonstrate the boundary systems that their parents had. If the parents' boundaries were non-existent or damaged, the children will develop the same boundary systems. But what if one parent had damaged boundaries and the other had, say, walls instead of boundaries? The child may grow up as an adult that shifts back and forth from one to the other. Sometimes people use walls of anger or walls of fear or silence or walls of words in place of external boundaries to control physical distance and touch with others. People can use these walls in place of internal boundaries to keep from sharing who they are with other people and to keep from listening when other people share with them. This is so important in our next lesson, which is on intimacy. Using walls instead of boundaries will prohibit intimacy with our loved ones. It is impossible to have an open, trusting relationship with someone if we have walls up where we don't allow them in and we do not allow ourselves out. Now, why do we need boundaries? Having no boundaries, one may often be offended because they're powerless to stop the offense. We can get our feelings hurt, we can get stepped on, walked on, pushed around because we have no boundaries. When our boundaries have been transgressed, we feel anger, fear, pain, and then resentment sets in, and then we want to get even with everybody. We are exposed to opportunities for resentment to occur more often than it would if we had good, healthy, functional boundaries. And we could protect ourselves from being offended. And so when we develop this victimized way of thinking and we say, I'm sick of being a victim, I'm sick of people walking on me and taking advantage of me, there may be a good reason for that. It might really be happening. It may not be our imagination if we don't have good, healthy boundaries. Without internal boundaries, we are easily victimized and offended in relationships, and then intimacy is blocked because we throw a wall up. Also, we cannot hear who others are either, what they think you are or share, and you cannot share who you are without internal boundaries. We must set appropriate boundaries with ourselves before we can set boundaries with others. Otherwise, we will merge with the people around us and become overly dependent, and that is what codependence is. We merge with the people around us, lose our identity, take on their problems, take on their solutions, and if we don't adopt and learn good, healthy boundaries, we're going to be subject to codependent behavior again. Setting boundaries involves drawing the line between your life and the lives of others. Again, that is recovering from codependency. drawing the line between you and another person. Gaining power over codependency means accepting full responsibility for your life and letting go of responsibility for the lives of others. And when you start working on your boundaries, it's going to help you with steps 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. There's 4 basic boundary impairments: non-existent boundaries, damaged boundaries, walls instead of boundaries, and moving back and forth from no boundaries to walls, which is the extreme of the two. Non-existent boundaries is the type of impairment that can leave people with no sense of being abused or of being abusive, and that's why people who are so abusive and obnoxious and in your face probably have no boundaries, and they don't know that they're doing that is so distasteful to other people. They may allow others to take advantage of them physically, sexually, emotionally, or intellectually, with clear knowledge that they have the right to say, no, stop that. But they don't have boundaries, and they assume the other person is going to stop. A codependent with no boundaries not only lacks protection, but also has no ability to recognize another person's right to have boundaries. And therefore, they may move through others' boundaries unaware that they are doing something inappropriate. And so codependents who thought, well, I would never transgress someone else's boundaries and do anything that would be abusive to them. But if they don't know anything about boundaries, they may be doing that in some instances. When they take over another person's life and try to solve their problems, that's exactly what they're doing, is overstepping their boundaries. People with intact or healthy boundaries cannot imagine mature adults unable to stop abusive or victim behavior, and therefore they hold little sympathy for the person trapped in the agony of codependency. We've all had loved ones that we've seen in horribly abusive situations, and we've begged them to get out, and we've said, why on earth would they put up with it? How can they put up with it? They have no boundaries. They don't see it as abuse. They assume it must be okay. And also, if they're in denial, they have shut down their internal alarm systems. They are numb to any kind of feelings. If they've never gotten in touch with their feelings, they can take enormous amounts of abuse and never even realize what's happening. Damaged boundaries is a system with holes in it. Remember I told you to imagine a square with dots far apart? It's damaged boundaries. That's not good boundaries, because people can come in and trespass on your boundaries.
Oh, you saying like you leaving yourself open?
Too open. You've got boundaries a little bit, sometimes, occasionally, but not enough.
Okay.
With damaged boundaries, one can, at times or with certain individuals, say no, set limits, and take care of themselves. But at other times or with other people, they are powerless to set boundaries. They have only partial awareness that others have boundaries. They feel the same way about others. Occasionally, they will respect another person's boundaries, but then other times, totally oblivious to them. They may step into someone else's life and try to control or manipulate them. And there is another reason why codependents do what they do, because they have unhealthy boundaries. And walls instead of boundaries, I would have thought at one time, well, that's good. Yeah, you get some good, strong, thick walls up. Don't let anybody hurt you or abuse you. But walls are a substitute for intact boundaries and are usually made up of anger or fear. These people send out very clear messages: don't come near me. Their anger may be easily triggered so that others may stay clear of them, or are very careful what they say or how they say it. People that you have to walk on eggs around have walls instead of boundaries. Also, very fragile, fearful people use walls to avoid contact with anyone. And there's two types of walls: silence and words. One using a wall of silence does not emit an energy field of emotion. They sort of fade into the woodwork, and they observe what's going on in life instead of participating in it. One using a wall of words may take over a conversation. We've all known people like that. They come in and just totally take over the situation by compulsive talking, not allowing others to contribute. This is controlling and manipulative and a strong sign of codependency. Now, some people may switch from a wall of silence to a wall of words anytime, though always remaining invulnerable behind the thick wall. And the last damaged boundaries or boundary impairment is moving back and forth from no boundaries to walls. This usually happens when a codependent risks coming out from behind his wall and becomes vulnerable. The person suddenly realizes that they're too vulnerable and they're defenseless because they have no boundaries. Experiencing life without boundaries is painful, whether the person encounters a true offender or someone who is merely taking responsibility for their own life. And so a codependent who ventures out from behind their wall and has no boundaries, doesn't know what the rules are, what's going on out there, can be hurt very easily.
Betsy, usually when people have walls, aren't they people who have been hurt?
Oh yes, they've been hurt, so they throw up a wall and then they decide to come out from behind the wall, but they didn't get healthy first and they didn't get some good healthy boundaries. And when they do that and someone hurts them, that other person may not intend to hurt them at all. They might just be exercising their freedom to have boundaries. But the person with no boundaries wouldn't know that and would take it personally and would think it was done to hurt them.
And that kind of person would be very hard to deal with.
Have a relationship
Have a
with.
relationship
You couldn't.
with. You'd be frozen from them.
Yes, whether it was a parent, a child, a friend, no matter who it was.
But you have to respect their boundaries.
That's right.
Eventually.
The exposed codependent experiences this pain and quickly retreats again to what walls give protection: the wall of anger, the wall of fear or silence or words, because they don't want to be attacked again. They will feel as though they are being attacked when really the other person was just being cautious.
So they take everything personal.
With no boundaries. The sad thing about walls is that although they do give solid protection, they do not allow for intimacy and leave the codependent even more isolated and lonely. Well, what in the world are healthy boundaries? With intact, flexible, and internal boundaries, people can have intimacy in their lives when they choose, but are protected against being abused physically, sexually, emotionally, intellectually, or spiritually, except when confronted by a major offender. So even people with healthy, good, solid, strong boundaries can be hurt. But that's part of life, and that's part of being vulnerable. When this happens, one may feel pain, fear, and anger, but resentment and the desire to punish that person is avoided because they're healthy. They got hurt, okay, forget it, they get over it. And this is a good sign of healthy behavior and that you're on the road to recovery. There are 4 areas in which boundaries can be violated: physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally or intellectually. Physical boundaries are easy. We know that. When somebody's overstepped our boundaries physically and hurt us, that's easy to see. We overstep other people's boundaries physically when we try to control their physical behavior, what they do, how they choose to do it, where they go, when they go. And you see, way back then when we were practicing codependent behaviors, we were stepping on other people's boundaries and didn't have a clue, had no idea. Emotionally, others cannot overstep your boundaries unless you allow them. They cannot make you feel any particular way. That's hard to understand and hard to realize, that other people cannot make us feel a certain way. Their lives invade yours when you carry their burdens, when you feel their feelings, instead of holding on to what you feel or worry over things you have no power to control in their lives. You overstep their boundaries when you try to control, fix, or feel for them. This includes trying to make them love you, trying to make them happy, make them feel sorry for something they've done. It's overstepping their emotional boundaries. This is a good one. I think this is very insightful. Spiritually, others overstep your boundaries when they require you to stifle your spiritual life to make them feel more comfortable. And we've all known people like that. Or when they require you to believe exactly as they believe. That's overstepping your boundaries. You can overstep their boundaries when you take responsibility for their spiritual life. How many times have we done that with our loved ones that we've tried to save? When you play God in their lives, when you dictate God's will for them or use spiritual manipulation. Wonderful lesson here. Emotionally and intellectually, others overstep your boundaries when you change your opinion or beliefs to try to be accepted by them. What does that remind you of? Codependency. You overstep their boundaries when you think for them, speak for them, try to solve their problems, and give unsolicited advice.
Isn't that too like you're
Did that
trying to
Sunday
control them?
at church. I mean, at the picnic. Now I realize it.
That's good. That's good that you realized it. That's all we can do when we make a mistake, is realize it, and if we can, correct it. Establishing boundaries is exciting and rewarding and well worth the effort. It brings security and respect to all relationships. And speaking of relationships, our time is out, but in our next session we're going to talk about what is intimacy and how do you get and have intimate relationships. And right now we're going to go to Kevin's Corner and see what the kids are doing. And first of all, I'd like to invite anybody who would like more information to write to We Are Not Alone, 185 Anthus Drive, Nashville, Tennessee. And thank you, ladies, for joining us. And now let's go to Kevin's Corner.
Hi, I'm Kevin. This is Kevin's Corner. These are my friends, Mario, Eric, and Caress. Our story today is boundaries. Betsy?
Thank you, Kevin. Boundaries is a very, very important story. It's very important to have boundaries. Not everybody knows that. Not everybody has good boundaries. So we're going to talk a little bit about what boundaries are, why we need good boundaries, and how we get good boundaries. We're going to talk about Jamie again today, and we're going to hear a story about Jamie. Jamie came home from school the first day in tears. "Nobody likes me," cried Jamie. "I don't have any friends. Why don't the other kids want to play with me?" Maybe Jamie doesn't have any boundaries. What are boundaries? Boundaries are invisible borders. A border is a line drawn around something. This page has a border drawn around it. These boundaries protect us. They protect us from people who might try to come into our space and abuse us. And they keep us from going into the space of others and abusing them. So it's very important to have boundaries. We can have outside boundaries and we can have inside boundaries. Outside boundaries help us choose how near we may want someone to stand or sit by us. If we do not have good outside boundaries, we may get too close to other people or shove or push without even knowing that we're doing it. Inside boundaries help us choose good thoughts and good feelings. Good inside boundaries help us see when someone is not treating us right so we can stop them. If we do not have good inside boundaries, we may use bad words or say unkind things around people, or we may be too loud around people, and they won't want to be around us. Without boundaries, we might treat other people bad and not even know that we're doing it. And so you see, it's very important for us to have boundaries so that we can get along better with people and have friends. Jamie's mother sat him down that first day of school and told him about boundaries. She helped Jamie to understand that if you will learn how to set boundaries with your friends and then have those same boundaries for other people, your friends will like you better and they'll want you to play with them. Jamie went to bed that night and he prayed, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord to help me learn how to set boundaries and help me keep those boundaries with my friends." Jamie couldn't wait to go to school the next day and make new friends. Let's ask some questions about boundaries.
Kevin, what are boundaries?
Boundaries are about borders to protect us.
Oh, that's a good answer. Eric, what are the two types of boundaries?
Inside and outside.
Very good, Eric.
Okay. Mario, what are some of the things we may do if we do not have good boundaries?
We may talk too loud or say the wrong thing or shove or push when you should not.
A good answer, Mario.
Did anybody learn anything about boundaries today? Good. I hope you did. Let me see your pictures. Ooh, looking good.
Wow.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for coming to Kevin's Corner. See you next time.
Bye-bye.